All right, we are live, whether anybody likes it or not. Welcome, welcome, welcome. It's so good to be here, especially with my friend Bill. I'll make a quick introduction. I'm not going to make a huge thing out of this, but Bill was born in St. Louis, Missouri, and now living in Nashville. We see each other all the time. Gatlinburg Songwriter Festival. Even though you weren't there this year, Bill, but we'll see each other periodically. We write over Zoom, songwrite I mean, and he's a singer songwriter, comedian, all around entertainer, and award-winning broadcaster. Let's make him welcome Bill Whyte. Thank you, brother, for being on here with me.
And a former Chippendale dancer. You left that out.
Well, listen, man, that's a whole other show, man. That's a whole.
I used to have a Cheetos with an odd apple pie on the back. I got to tell people.
Yes, absolutely, man. Well, listen, what's happening in your world? How you doing, buddy?
I'm doing good. For the folks that might be tuning in, we were talking off camera about how odd this is a little bit for both of us, because essentially we've known each other for so many years that we are literally flipping our traditional role. I was for years, and interviewed you many times through your career. All these years later, it's flipped. You're interviewing, which is so
Isn't it crazy? You know.
Yeah.
Well, let's start there, right? So I'm going to I'm gonna take us back to 1984. Okay, so that's when you and I met.
I had hair in 1984.
I love it, man. And I had way too much hair too, man. Woo, Lord. So 1984, man. Take the watchers, viewers out there back to 1984. How did we get to know one another from your point of view?
Yeah, the very first time I met you, I was in a little nightclub called the Mine Shack there in Cincinnati area where you're from, and Brighton for a lot of years. And they had a talent show, and you snuck in and made it even underage, and got up and competed. I mean, just a little beginning, nothing, singing like a medley of sorrows or something like that.
Yes.
And I just remember how good you sang at an early age. And thinking about, man, should I just tell the kid to get a real job or have him go for it, you know? And so it really was no surprise to me that just a few years later, you were part of a really noted group and having a lot of hits. It surprised me in the least bit. Made me very happy.
Well, and for me, I had known about you before you and I had met, just because you were on WUBE in Cincinnati, where I grew up. I grew up in Fairfield, Ohio, right? So tell me about your days in Cincinnati at WUBE.
Oh, great day. I did two tours there. It's always have it. I was there the first time for about 7 years. I went back as time for 5 years. And I was just blessed that a guy named Mike Chapman came in my life. I was working there part-time and doing an oldie show, and he heard something in me when they wanted to change. I didn't know anything about major market radio, but I'll give you a story about how my group took off. And it all happened different songs. My career's always been linked to music and radio, kind of intersecting.
Right.
I used a lot of skills to put on my own radio show. And in fact, to this day, some kid will come and go, Mr. Whyte, how do I get on the radio? And I always go, get your own damn radio, play your own song. Sure.
Yeah.
But I was trying to get on the air, and I would not be on the air, and then the new guy, Mike Chapman, came in, and about the time he got there, there was a huge story in the Cincinnati area about Newport, Kentucky. And for those of you that might not know the Queen City region, Newport, Kentucky is literally right across the Ohio River, and it's part of the Cincinnati Metro route. Its reputation, in '84, they were trying to come out of that old reputation that Newport used to have. I don't know if you remember, that used to be the place for gambling,
oh yes,
and prostitution and all of that.
Right, absolutely.
The city is spending millions of dollars trying to spip it up what they did. It's beautiful now, and it's a good place to go. But back then it was an easy target for comedians to pick on. And there was a big news story about the home state savings bank screwing a bunch of people out of money. And so, and I'm just working part-time trying to come to radio full-time, and I'm at home and I've seen a news story. And I took out my guitar and I wrote a parody of Spanish Angel song in the 7 Newport Angels about 7 prostitutes in Newport upset because from they saved all of their money. And so the leading guy at that time was a guy named Larry, who had been on there like Airport Love in Cincinnati, but he played a little guitar too. So I went in and I showed Larry the song, and he and I went down to the studio on a cartridge tape, and I bring cartridge tape. And he started playing the song on the air the next night. Well, this new guy who we lost, Mike Chapman, had no more than said his bags in the door and said, hello, my name is blah, blah, blah. And he's a national radio. So Larry started playing the song. And the next thing you know, that night, watching TV, the local NBC affiliate, the mayor of Newport on, and he's pointing the finger at us, you being that, and every somebody on my set. Oh my God! And I looked at my wife and I said, "We are so fired." I thought I'd be out of a job. And so Mike finds out about it because they call him down in Nashville trying to find out what's going on with this radio station, because the newspaper covered it, every TV station came in and rolled film on it, and it became a thing. And so I didn't know that at that time that any kind of talk is good talk. And he was trying to get ratings for the radio station because the radio station was in a war with another country station. Well, I don't know how many thousands of dollars of free publicity that thing got the radio station. I just didn't understand any of it. But the next thing you know, he calls me in and says, I want you to be part of this new morning show I'm putting together. And I became part of the 7-person zoo that went in there.
Oh my God.
And I didn't know anything, and it was wild and it was crazy, and I just got an education from the ground floor up. I wasn't even the main player at that time. I was just part of an ensemble, at the time. But that's how I got my break in radio, was because of that stupid song. And I found out through the years that using that little funny musical skill on my radio shows paid dividends a lot more than just that one time, too, throughout my entire career. So.
Oh my God, that is so fantastic. So you grew up in St. Louis, though, right? So
yeah, a little small town about 50 miles west of St. Louis off I-70, Montgomery City, Missouri. Population about 1,000 people, real small.
Wow. Okay. So basically, you just transferred from St. Louis to Cincinnati for a radio job. I mean, that was the.
You don't have time for all this, Brady. I had a band when I was 16. When I was 18 years of age, I'm living in Missouri, my mom and dad's house, getting ready to go to college, and I have a little AM country radio station comes on, and I hear a friend of mine on the radio station that I used to compete with in FFA public speaking contests.
Hey, speaking of speaking real fast, Bill, they say that you're echoing a little bit.
Yeah, that's kind of what I heard all before. I don't know what that is, Brady.
Ain't no telling. Maybe just turn your volume down just a touch.
All right, I'm turning it down. Can you hear me still?
Yeah, I can.
Well, let's try that. Yeah, I can still hear that too, Brady, but I don't know what to do about it.
Okay, hopefully that's a little bit better. Is that better, everyone? I'm asking everyone.
Hello.
They say that I'm echoing too. So here, I'm gonna put some headphones on, and then that way I will eliminate. How's that? Is that a little bit better?
Is that any better, y'all that are listening right now? Or are you still hearing any slapback? Are you hearing anything, Brady?
Okay, I think I'm better now.
Okay. Now you say something. I'll put my headphones on too.
Hey, is that better, everyone? Is that better?
Let's try that. I can hear you
cool.
just fine.
Okay, good. Okay. So back to your story of St. Louis then. So
I'm driving and I hear this friend of mine, and I'm thinking now, first of all, I thought that was the coolest thing I'd ever heard, that somebody I knew was on a radio station. And it was just a little 1,000 watt AM country radio station. And I can literally remember thinking, man, I beat that guy in those contests. If he can do that, why can't I do that? And I literally drove 30 miles north to find that radio station, Brady, 18 years of age. And I found it, and it's in a one-bedroom trailer that sat in a cow pasture, and the call letters were KPCR, Cow Pasture Country Radio is what it stood for. And I am not making that up. And I went in as an 18-year-old kid and found the owner. Him and his wife owned this little 1,000-watt radio station. I must have said something like, I'd like to be on the radio. And he had me fill out an application, and he took me into the studio, which is like a slide door in a one-bedroom trailer, and sat me down and said, here's the 45 record, here's the needle, here's this knob. He says, you're on. And he left. And I'm on the air as an 18-year-old kid for about 30 minutes. I can't even imagine how horrible that sounded. So I go to college, and then I get a letter. Back when people sent letters, I got an official letter in the mail from them saying, congratulations, from this point forward, you are going to be our weekend warrior. And that's what I was called on the air, the weekend warrior. So get this, I'm in college in Warrensburg, Missouri, Central Missouri State University, home of the Fighting by God Mules. And had I known I was going to be a jackass the rest of my life, I'd have went to Columbia and been a tiger. But anyway, so I'm in Warrensburg, and this shows you how my career really did combine with music and radio all my life, because I would get out of classes on a Friday morning, and I would drive 3 hours across the state of Missouri, and I would play a show with my band on Friday night at a little Opry we had, drive another 30 minutes to my mom and dad's and sleep, then get up the next day and go there and work from noon until sunset. And those old radio stations, those 1,000-watt radio stations, were sunrise to sunset operations, which means they could only operate when the sun came up, and you had to shut it off when the sun went down. So I would work from noon until the sunset and turn the transmitter off, and then I would drive an hour for a second show with that band, drive back to my dad's, and Sunday morning I would go there and turn the radio station on and work from sunrise until noon, and then go back to classes 3 hours over near Kansas City. And that went on 4 years. And after I graduated, they hired me full-time, and I worked full-time there in that small market a couple of years. And that led to another small market radio station. Then my band wound up rooting in Cincinnati, playing at a club there that Sawyer Brown played at, and Butch Baker, who you know, it was a rotating, and our band was really good, and they loved us. And they gave us half the dates on the year. And the second day I was there, my now wife walked in, so that happened. And this Duke Hambledon walked in, who was an 18-year-old kid that worked with me at that radio station in that cow pasture, and he was the program director at WUBE. And I didn't even know he was there. And he was responsible for saying, why don't you come back and do an oldie show? And one thing kind of led to another because of that chance meeting there in Cincinnati, and led to a long radio career. And you know what's really great about the whole thing is that Duke went into the Country Radio Broadcast Hall of Fame before I did. So two kids from a cow pasture, wound up in the Country Radio Broadcast Hall of Fame. So what are the odds of that? So
I'm telling you, I remember Duke well. I mean, great dude. And so Cincinnati, as you know, I mean, and I was the same way. I was a huge baseball fan growing up in Cincinnati.
I got the cap on, you can see, pal.
Absolutely, and I just I couldn't get enough of it. Played ball all of my life. Was there when Pete Rose hit his 3,000th hit. It was just unbelievable.
You know where I was when he hit 3192?
Where?
In that nightclub where you sang.
Are you kidding me?
I watched it on TV when he hit 3192. If I didn't have to work at that nightclub, I would have been at the game. But I was at the Mine Shaft Corral. Never forget it.
Oh my God! And it's just crazy. And so briefly, tell us a little bit about your love of baseball, and because I know that you have this thing about going out and visiting like ballparks and stuff. Just tell us a little bit about that.
Yeah, I don't know if I'm going to get that or not, but you're probably the same way with boys. I can remember the very first ball game my dad took me to, which was the St. Louis Cardinal game against the Pittsburgh Pirates. Me and my brother, we were Cub Scouts. It was at Old Sportsman's Park in St. Louis, and I can see that ball field right here, just like it was yesterday, just being a small kid and walking up and seeing that big baseball field under lights. Stan Musial played that night, for goodness sake, and Roberto
Clemente for the Pirates, and it was Dal Maxville and Dick Rode and the other Bill Whyte, who played first base, that went on to be the commissioner for baseball, and the Cardinals got beat 18-2. And I remember it like it was yesterday, and
wow,
I was hooked. I was just hooked on the game, and I still love it today. And so I'm one of those nuts trying to get around and see every Major League Baseball park, and I'm losing because they keep building new ones, and I'm about 8 behind right now, I think. So.
I love it. Well, so listen, so I know that you had a big love for baseball.
Wait, let me give you a great baseball story before I forget, Brady.
Absolutely.
I was at WUBE at the time, and they had a media old pro baseball game at a rebuilt Crosley Field that they rebuilt a small version of it in Cincinnati. Crosley Field is where the Reds played for a long time. That people loved that old stadium, so they kind of rebuilt a miniature version. So to draw attention to it, they had a bunch of media folks come out and play baseball with some old pros like Joe Torre and people like that who were there. And so I'm on the media team, and I rarely, in my whole life, Brady, I rarely ask for autographs because it doesn't seem appropriate to me. If I'm the host, it doesn't seem appropriate to be a germ and go, "Hey, Brady, would you sign my prosthetic leg here for me?" Or whatever. It just never seemed right to me. So I rarely did. But I came in from the outfield and sat right next to Tug McGraw, and he was really nice, the old Philadelphia Philly reliever. And there was a baseball between us, and I said, "Mr. McGraw, would you mind?" And he said, "No," and he was so nice, and he signed the baseball, and I took it home. Well, fast forward about 3 years, and I took the morning radio job in Milwaukee, Wisconsin. And one of the very first things they had me do was to go out and MC the big state fair concert, and the headliner was Tim McGraw. And I got to go on the bus and interview Tim, and I took that baseball with me. And I showed it to him, and he looked at it, and he said, where did you get that? And so I told him the story, and he turned it around and autographed the other side of it. So in my little case over here, I don't have many things, but I've got a baseball with Tug McGraw and Tim McGraw's autograph on the same baseball. Which is
that is very, very cool.
Yeah.
That's an excellent story. I love it. So yeah, and I know Tim well, man, and he was actually a good ball player too.
I bet he was.
So I know that you had a love for baseball, but knowing you've got an incredible sense of humor, and you've always had this comedy thing about you. So tell me, where did that come from? And have you ever done stand-up or anything?
I have done stand-up, done some of it, experimented with that, and had a blast learning that craft a little bit. And I had a couple of good friends, Haywood Banks in particular, who a lot of people know in the Bob and Tom Show. We've become lifelong friends, and I used to go open shows for him some at the Funny Bones in Ohio and the surrounding states. But there was a guy on that 7-person show that I was telling you about. They hired a full-time comedian to write. Back in that day, radio was like Gary Burbank. For your folks that know Gary Burbank, Cincinnati guy, Earl Pitt's American. That's Gary Burbank. Yeah. And a large part of his radio show was radio sketch driven, where like you would write characters and create characters, and it was old school, but so much fun, Oh, so man. Roger Naylor was the name of the comedian, who was a brilliant comedian there, and he would come in every day, and we developed some characters for him to write, or he was responsible for writing a couple of comedy bits that we would produce and put on the show. And he was just so funny, and I would stand over his shoulder every day and watch him just from nothing put something on a piece of paper and go in a studio, and then it'd just be hysterical. So I think I just absorbed him a lot, and watching why this worked, why that doesn't work, why this is funny, why that's not funny. And then you wind up doing, morning radio show when you've got 4 hours to kill on the air every day, where you're standing on your feet looking for material. It gives you a chance to develop that craft and learn to be very quick on your feet. And learn to write comedy. And I've always written so much all my life, Brady, that this as a writer. If you write enough, that skill set gets honed in pretty good. And I've gotten where I became really good at on-demand writing. If I looked in the paper and saw something that I'm always looking for something that's funny to write about, I could churn those things out real quick. In fact, so much so that there was a syndicate. When I was in Milwaukee, I hired this company called United Stations, that was owned by Dick Clark at the time in New York, and they were called Comedy on Demand. So basically anything I could dream up, they could give me. If I said, man, I need Tom Cruise to call me tomorrow. Well, I could write a script. I could type out a script, and here's Tom Script's lines, here's my lines, and this actor would call who sounded a lot like Tom Cruise, and we'd record it, and I'd go, hey, we got Tom Cruise on the phone. But it also led to an awful lot of writing parody songs about things that were in the news locally. And so I would write these parody songs. I'd send them a verse and a chorus, and I'd say, use this song, and they'd fly to Nashville, and it would come back sounding a lot like the record. And we'd play it on the air.
We did that with God Bless Texas,
right? I was just going to say, you and I did the very same thing. Xavier University in Cincinnati had a big game in the NCAA tournament against Texas, and I called Brady and I said, man, what would you think about, let me send you these lyrics. Would you record this? It's called X Beats Texas or something like that.
Right, that's
to God Bless Texas. And I think you used the tracks from the hit.
I did.
And went in and sang over and that thing blew up. Blew up because Xavier got on a roll, and we wore that thing out. And that happened a few times, Brady. And the United Stations thing led to a phone call one day from the head comedy writer in New York saying, Bill said, man, we've been reading your stuff. You're funny. Man, we like what you write. He said, if you ever want to write something on a national scale, not Milwaukee stuff, but a national scale, we'll pay you for that. Wow. So I said, okay. So every now and then I would send them a piece, and then one piece led to 2 pieces, led to 5 or 6 pieces a week. And a lot of them were parody songs. They would call and say, we need a song about whatever's in the news, and I would send them a verse and a chorus, and they would produce it. And the one I remember the most was when the head writer called one day and said, Bill, we need a song about Bruce Jenner deciding not to be Bruce Jenner anymore. And so I parodied, Man, I Feel Like a Woman. And that went out that went out coast to coast. And I'll tell you one other great parody. This happened so many times in my radio career, but when the Packers, since the Green Bay Packers, which is religion in Wisconsin if you live there, the Green Bay Packers were getting ready to play the Carolina Panthers for the National Conference Championship to go to the Super Bowl. And I found out that a radio friend of mine who did the mornings in Charlotte, North Carolina, had rewritten the Lone Star hit No News into a song called Big News about the Carolina Panthers kicking the Packers' butt that weekend and going to the Super Bowl. And I found out about it by accident, and I thought, what? And so I called an old friend of mine, Dale Turner, who worked for RCA Records, the head of their record label, and I said, Dale, is Lone Star recording? And he goes, yeah. And he just laughed, and he said, would you like to talk to Richie? And I said, I sure as heck would. He said, well, they're recording that thing the next day in the studio. So the next day, we're rolling tape. We called the studio, and they put us right through to Richie. And I said, Richie, this is Bill Whyte. I said, are you recording? Come on. And he just laughed, and I said, now when the Packers kick their butts, are you going to let me rewrite those lyrics the right way, and you're going to go back in and record the song again? And he goes, if the Packers win, I promise we'll do that. And sure enough, the Packers win. That night, I wrote a parody called, Big News, with the Packers kicking their butt, and danged if they didn't go in the studio, recorded over the original tracks. Brady, it was phenomenal. We started playing it the next day. Every radio station in Wisconsin wanted a copy and started playing it. The Packers win the Super Bowl. They produce it up after the Super Bowl. They take John Madden and John Summerall's call and intersperse it within the song that they had recorded.
Oh, my God.
And so I was in Nashville for some reason at the time, and I got a call from the owner of the radio station and said, Bill, you ought to be here. I ain't believing what I'm seeing. It was snowing to beat the band, and they had gone out and did a remote where they had those, it was on a cassette, $5 a pop to buy that song, with all the proceeds going to the Child Abuse Prevention Fund. He said, there are people lined up in the snow as far as I can see. And it wound up selling over $50,000 or $60,000 worth of tapes, that all went to the Child Abuse Prevention Fund, all from that little parody song. So.
Oh my God, that's so good. That's so good. And it's so wild as songwriters. As my dad used to say, there's so many ways to skin a cat, right? There's so many ways.
Well, these days, Brady, I don't think I'd be saying there's so many ways to skin a cat. It's bad timing on your part.
You can't do that
because you'll be eating them next, man. I'm telling you.
That's very true, man. Yeah, absolutely. So, in
fact, I can't watch the musical Cats now without getting hungry. It's terrible.
I know, right? Absolutely. So, for those just now tuning in, I'm talking to Bill Whyte. In 2012, if I'm not mistaken, Bill, correct me if I'm wrong, was awarded the highest honor for a country radio personality when he was inducted into the Country Radio Broadcasters Hall of Fame.
And one of the great treats that night was the fact that you snuck in and stood back against the wall, and I didn't spot you until later, and that was cool. So.
I was there, and I wouldn't have missed it for the world, you know. I mean, because for me, you know, having been, you know, a kid in Cincinnati, growing up, doing my thing or whatever, and become friends with like the dude in Cincinnati, man. You know, I'm like, oh my God, you know, and then you go on to become this Hall of Famer, you know, and then we become even closer friends, and we start writing and all that kind of stuff, which we'll get into. But just for a second here, so you have to let us know, what was the strangest moment on radio that you've ever had?
Oh man, the strangest one.
The strangest one.
Well, I'll try to give you a couple of quick stories. I was interviewed by Billboard after finding out they were going to do that, and one of the questions was, what do you think was your greatest day on the radio, and what do you think was the worst day on the radio? And the answer was the same, because I was at WSM FM radio the morning when I got a phone call from my program director saying, turn your TV sets on. And my producer turned on a bank of TV sets against the back wall, and I'm watching it, and we're live, and you know, I'm trying to figure out what I'm seeing when the second plane hit the second tower, and I realized what was going on. So I was on the air. The rest of every other radio station in Nashville, I think, went to their national services, ABC or Fox. They cut away from local programming, but my program director left me on that day, and I was on from about 5:30 that morning till about 8 o'clock that night, covering 9/11. So I always say that's the greatest day. You know, because it was an honor to be a conduit to the audience. Many of them calling in that morning crying, trying to figure out, is the world ending, what's going on, and me being able to be the guy to hold their hand saying, we'll get through this and we'll figure it out. And it was the worst day for all the obvious reasons. But I've had a lot of funny, strange days too many to recall. And I know when I went to Milwaukee, they were trying to create awareness for me being a new person to the market, and we did this contest. Garth was coming in concert, and we did a contest called What Would You Do for front row seats and a chance to meet Garth Brooks backstage? What would you do? And we were going to do a live radio show, and the top 5 had to do whatever they said they were going to do live on the air. So we got all these, at that time, facts. The faxes just poured in. Some of them were gross and you couldn't begin to do them, but we narrowed it down to a top 5, got them out there. I remember number 3 was a lady that got the mayor to come out and give it a proclamation as Garth Brooks Day in Milwaukee. That was 3rd place. Wow. 2nd place went to this big old heavyset dude in a cowboy hat and a Speedo and cowboy boots that came out with a chainsaw and a Volkswagen and a guitar and sawed his Volkswagen in half while singing a Garth song. And that was 2nd place.
Wow. Okay.
Yeah. 1st place went to a young man who brought his pickup truck and his mama with him. And he had the pickup truck drop the tailgate, and there's straw bales, and there's a barn built in the back with doors that open and a picture of Garth and all this stuff in it. And he's up there with his guitar playing. But the finale was he got his mother up in the back of the truck in a Holstein cow outfit with a big old udder, and he rigged the udder so he could milk his mom. And so we caught a big picture. We got a big picture of a squirt of milk coming out into a bucket. And he got to go backstage and show the picture to Garth, and I'm not sure how Garth received
oh my God, it's like,
that.
Gee whiz, man.
But it was all about getting attention to being a brand new guy in the market and go, hello, here I am, tune me in.
Oh my God.
So that's a pretty good one. Yeah.
Oh my God. So I mean, we've got listeners out there, by the way. Everybody's commenting, saying hello, Bill. There's people from Cincinnati on here that's checking us out. It seemed early on we had some audio difficulties, but we're rocking and rolling now. Thankfully. So the big question is, so times have changed. I mean, you and I have seen some major changes, not only here in Nashville with downtown Nashville and how music is recorded and just done in general. How do you think that radio has changed from, let's say, like 1987?
Well, if you're talking about country radio, it's hard to get a country song on country radio these days. You know, I mean, in the old traditional sense, which leads to a lot of complaints from the older generations. But I always try to, remind myself and remind folks that ask that radio is ever changing, and it's about demographics. And even country radio these days, when I was on the air, we were trying to appeal to 25, 54, and these days I think the demographic is much more like 18 to 34. And you have to remember, I mean, Brady, you're kind of on that bubble there a little bit, because you have a real love for, you got Troy Seals, for God's sake, and your lineage and people like that. So you love that kind of stuff like I do. But at the same time, you're young enough that you were influenced by pop acts and the acts that are on the radio today. Most of them were not listening to George Strait and Alan Jackson and Hank Williams and Charlie Price. They were listening to, some of the boy bands, and they were listening to so all the music, the country music has become influenced by that influx of young wannabe country singers now. So the dynamic has certainly changed. And there's, the good news is, because of the internet and because of streaming, for good or bad, depending upon how you view that, the good part of that is you can find whatever you love. It's your choice, and you can get it on demand. If you love, I don't care who it is, Aaron Tippin, who I love, you can find Aaron Tippin, somewhere and listen to him all day if you want to.
Right.
So that's the big difference, But on commercial radio, boy, it is. You're right. It's it's just a whole new ball game.
It really is. I mean, my cousin TJ and I were talking today about Beyonce. Right, because Beyonce put out that country record, and I even heard Dolly say something about Beyonce not winning any kind of awards and stuff like that, and I think that Dolly's whole thought process was, well, hey, there's so many country artists here that live, breathe, eat it. It's only fair to give it to the people who are doing it nonstop, every day, all day. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
So and I think that Beyonce. I mean, like the record or not like the record, it's very different than the stream of music that we've got going on here. And as you know, Nashville is such a cliquey kind of town, and things start going in a particular direction, and until they don't, And speaking of that, have you heard of Zach Top?
He's one of my favorites right now. I'm so rooting for this kid, and he is hardcore tradition, and it looks like he's going to break through, which would be amazing, because you're right, Brady. If we get one Zach Top that blows it up, that actually sells records, that moves the needle, then every record label is all of a sudden going to get a Zach Top. Same way when the Dixie Chicks came along, every label got a girl group all of a sudden.
Absolutely, absolutely. And whenever I heard Zach, I was introduced to Zach through Denny, my fiance, and she's always listening to up and comers and stuff like that or whatever, and told me about Zach. We were listening, and the first thing that I thought of, oh my gosh, it sounds like Keith Whitley, right? And then we find out, well, who's producing Zach? Well, it's Carson Chamberlain, right? So I'm like, wait a minute, I know Carson from way back in the days when I worked with Josh Logan in Kentucky, right? So I get in contact with Carson. I'm like, dude, Zach is killing it, man. This is really, really super, super cool. And then that's where you and I come in. I pitched him, if it ain't one thing, right? If it ain't one beer, it's another, right?
Yeah.
So he's got that 90s thing. And then I'm telling you, if he gets on a roll, man, you know how it's done. I've seen it done so many times. When one punches through, then about 4 or 5 more follow. So. Yeah. So I'm really, really hoping that kind of country comes back.
Yeah, I love the kid. If you haven't checked him out yet, pull up some of his stuff. If you like traditional country music, he's young and he's traditional all at the same time. I'm just rooting so hard for him. And there's another lesson about the music business. Carson Chamberlain, who's an old veteran in this town by now, took a chance on Zach Top, produced the album, and guess who's got the most co-writes on the album?
Right.
Carson Chamberlain.
Exactly.
And that's kind of how the music business works too, a little bit.
It is how the music business works. And sometimes you'll spend time working with an artist or whatever who's an up and comer, and nothing ever happened. We've done it many times. It just happens sometimes. So
you have to stay relevant too. You can't, you can't live in the past. If you want to be on the charts, you can't allow yourself to live in the past. And that's the great thing about Dolly, even though she is a traditionalist, she's a forward thinker. I mean, she'll move into she'll record with whoever. But right. Yeah, I mean, I get it. I mean, there's never, who are the CMA Entertainers of the Year's nominees this year? I know Chris Stapleton is nominated, but so is Post Malone, so is Jelly Roll, so right. I'm I do a lot of live performances, and I'm always trying to think, man, I don't want to get dated. I don't want to be dated. I love the past, but I want to stay right. up with what's going. And as a songwriter, you owe it to yourself to listen to what's on the radio and follow trends if you're going to get a song of yours recorded. But I never thought there'd be a day that we'd see like a Post Malone and Jelly Roll nominated for Entertainer of the Year. But I have come up with, this is my plan, man. I eat too much, and I've decided that I am going to tattoo the calories I eat at every meal on my face, and I'm going to go on tour as Belly Roll. What do you think?
I love it, man.
Yeah.
I love it, man. I love it.
Just trying to keep up.
I love it. So speaking of songwriting for a second, let's hang in there just for a little while. So you come to town. What year did you come to town, by the way?
I couldn't tell you, Brady. I'm the worst at years. I've been here 3 times. The first time I came as a developing artist for Old Ovation Records back in the day, and was an artist on the United Talent roster with Conway and Loretta and those group of folks who just been starved to death, And then, then the second time I came in, I took a job at WSM-FM doing the morning show there for a couple of years. Thought I'd become a full-time songwriter then, and found out how hard that was going to be very quickly, and still had bills to pay. And then wound up going back to Cincinnati for 5 more years before coming back to Nashville, where I've now been here 17, 18, 19 years. But because of radio, it gave me the blessing of being able to afford to be a songwriter. So, I can afford to, it's hard, man. It's hard to encourage a kid to say you're going to be a songwriter without telling them, well, if you're going to do that, man, get you a real job too when you come to town, because it's hard to pay the bills being a songwriter. And,
absolutely.
But for the last 17 years, that's all I've really concentrated on the craft, written a ton, and you develop your chops, and which allows you to move up with songwriters of higher grades, and you write better songs. And I've had a lot of cuts over the last couple of years after signing a little publishing deal, with the Bluegrass publishing company. So I'm blessed. Every time I get a cut, it's just a free blessing, and it doesn't have to pay my bills for me. It's just a blessing. And my hope is that one of these songs is going to get recorded that will be that song that all of a sudden a Brady Seals check starts coming in the mail, for like God Bless Texas or something like that. So, and then I would have 2 guitars hanging over my head too, instead of a stupid plaque.
Right. Oh my God. Well, so let's
let me interview you. Let me ask you about that. So your first big check as a songwriter was for what song?
One
that made you go, oh my gosh,
Well, it was probably early on when I was starting to get checks from the first Little Texas record. Now, my first check for a song was a song called One Blue Moment, and it was a song that was actually sang on Star Search, right?
Really?
So, yes, so that was a song that it was an original song. I was one of the co-writers, so that was one of my first checks, and I still literally have the stub around here somewhere. But my first big check was from the Little Texas days early on. And then they kept on getting bigger and bigger when Big Time came around, and that was like, wow, it's just now again, times were a lot different back then, but listen, royalties are royalties to this day. I mean, if you can get a Luke Combs cut or you can get a Morgan Wallen cut or something like that, the money still is there.
But it is much less than those days when those checks came in for you. It is much less because of streaming. But and in fact, to get a real check, I really think you almost need you have to have the mechanical sales have disappeared. You know, people buying hard copies is pretty much so all the money for the songwriter is in it being played on the radio or sung on TV or in a movie. It's in the performance of that song, and that's what that's the kind of hit we all strive for, is the performance song that everybody can say that song, you know.
Absolutely. And if there's any songwriters out there that want to ask Bill a question, now would be the time. You know, and I mean, we'll certainly try to answer them as best as we possibly can. But in the meantime, so let's talk about something for a second. So, what's your favorite song that you've written that maybe, you know, people don't know or whatever, and why, and what's the story behind it, and who would you pitch it to, kind of thing. Just give us that one song in your catalog that you think, my God, why hasn't that song been cut?
Well, that's a great question. I've always thought if I had decided to do a podcast based on that very thing, Brady, to bring in a songwriter like you, have them bring their guitar and say, play me your biggest hit. So you sing God Bless Texas. But then the second half of the show is you would have brought in a demo of the best song that you think you've written that's never been recorded, you know, and then play that. And then try to network with Music Row and the producers and the A&R people to get them to listen. I just think they might listen in and go, oh, I want to hear what Brady thinks is his, you know, that it might get some cuts, because we all have so many cuts we think, and they would be. If you get to be a certain level of songwriter, I'm convinced everybody's got big hits in their catalog. It's just, can you get it through the right door? Can you get it listened to? Is the timing right? Are you writing with the artist? You know, whatever. I don't have... I don't have one of those songs like you do, Brady, where I can say I wrote God Bless Texas and everybody knows the songs. But I've had a lot of my songs recorded by people that I love. Ray Stevens, and had a title track on Joe Nichols, and had several Cletus T. Judd cuts that are hysterical, you know, through the years. That was my first cut when after watching the CMA Awards show one night, and they ran dancers out with Leanne Womack and Alan Jackson, and I wrote a song called If George Strait Starts Dancing, Somebody Shoot Me in the Head. And that's that was the first legitimate cut I had in Nashville. Cletus recorded that.
Oh, I love it.
Probably, you know, I love history. There's a couple of songs. There's a song that I wrote with Bobby Tomberlin and Linda Davis about the ghost of Hank Williams showing up looking for his old wife, Audrey Williams, called Looking for Audrey. Like he never really stopped loving her, and it's a wonderful song. And in fact, the family hung it in their old A-frame cabin in Gatlinburg, where Audrey and Hank Jr. used to stay a lot. I've been there, and it hangs on the wall with our lyric sheet on it, Looking for Audrey. And so I love that because it has a lot of history. And another song that has a lot of history in it is from a duo called Darren and Brooke Aldrich, who have become major bluegrass artists. And helped them write a song called Grand Old Circle, because they've been on the Opry now 57, 58 times, and just talked to them one day about, man, you know, I'd had this idea started and they loved it, and it's become a go-to for them in the Opry. Worked with them and pulled a bunch of archival footage, and I got to go and they sang it on the Opry with the video behind them the first time, standing on that circle of wood that we all know about if you're lucky enough to ever get to sing on the Grand Ole Opry. So I love that for the history of it, but probably my favorite cut that I have is from my dear friends, you know, Linda Davis and Lang Scott and their family, Hillary Scott with Lady A and their young daughter Riley, because they recorded a contemporary Christian album called Love Remains that had a bunch of folks on there. Ricky Skaggs produced it, and Stephen Curtis is on there, and the Whytes, and you name it. It's a great, phenomenal album that was dedicated to Hillary's grandfather who died of cancer. And so Jimmy Fortune of the Statler Brothers and Sidney Perry, who's with Carrie Underwood singing high harmony and fiddle, and her daddy's a preacher. I'd gotten a note from Hillary about her grandfather after he passed, and they were going to dedicate this album to him. And there were a couple of notes, and she said, I called him Pawpaw, and he called me Sugar Babe, and I always considered him to be my safe haven to run to in times of trouble. And so we wrote a song called Safe Haven, and Hillary came in as a fourth writer on it to add some things about her grandfather that we didn't know, and it went on that album. and it won 2 Grammys. That album did. So
Wow.
yeah, which was I was actually in Miami when they announced it, and I pretty much shrieked all the way back to Nashville, I think, when they won the album, because it was such a personal song. I remember thinking nobody will ever record the song if they don't like it, because it was so
Wow.
personal about her grandfather and Lang's father. And as turned out to, and you probably have experienced this, and it was a writing lesson for me. That song has touched so many people, because we still get emails and letters, and people put up videos using pictures of a loved one they lost that they relate
Right.
to this song. So it touched a nerve of people that have had a loss that they had a safe haven to run to that is no longer there. So that's probably
Wow.
my favorite cut. But you know, I mean,
that's-
and I'm not just blowing up your hair here, but I sure love an awful lot of the stuff that you and I have written through the years too, and I'm glad you put some of it on at least a downloadable album where people can hear some of those things for sure.
Well, yeah, and I mean, to let everyone out there know a little bit about my record, Misfits Volume 1, because I've got probably 5 volumes of catalog stuff, but there's a bunch of songs that you and I have written, since I've had like a major label deal and stuff like that, and I thought, my God, man, these songs are freaking cool, man. So we need to put them out there, and who knows, maybe an artist down the line might hear it and love it. I do know that with the newest record, the hit off the record so far has been Southernism, man.
Which was your idea,
Well, I tell you, man, it was such a cool thing to get together with you and Josh, and I think that we just nailed Southernism, man. And I mean, for that matter, Catch 22. We wrote "Been There, Drunk That" together.
Well, that's still going to remain one of my favorites too, because I can remember I was really starting to dig in as a songwriter and wanting to write with better people, and I think I just bugged the heck out of you where you got tired of me and just finally said yes. I'll write with your tired old butt. Bring it on down to this location, and we'll
sure
try
glad I did. Man.
And so yeah, you had a little office down where the old Musicians Hall of Fame used to be at the time.
Yes, that's right.
I remember you saying, "What do you got?" And I pulled out that title. I said, "Been There, Drunk That," and I just remember you looking at me and laughing and going, "I can't say what you said. We're something if we don't write that."
That's right. That's exactly right.
And we wrote the fire out of it. It pretty much came flying out. Brady had a great groove on it. The video turned out to be great fun, and that's kind of the way the songwriting business is. I mean, I get that. Brady could write with about anybody he wants to write with, but once you prove yourself, then you kind of get in that circle a little bit. And that allowed the two of us to really develop a wonderful writing relationship. And rarely do we sit and write when we don't, A, laugh our butts off, and C, feel pretty proud about what's on the paper when we're done. So
Absolutely. Somebody said, Ronnie just now said, Crickets is great. So Crickets is a song that you had with Joe Nichols, right?
Yeah, that was the title track. That was kind of cool too. And there's a little story behind that. My friend Lisa Schaefer, who's out of the business now, but was a wonderful country singer on Lyric Street for a while, she called me one day and said, "Bill," she said, "I got an idea that's got you all over it." And when people, and I get those kind of calls from serious songwriters, they can't write funny songs as well. So every now and then I'll get a call from like a Jim McBride called me one time and had a funny Christmas song idea that we turned into, it was Ho, Ho, Ho from the Po-Po Pokey, because somebody gets arrested every Christmas Eve dinner. And but here's the guy that wrote Chattahoochee and all those Alan Jackson. So comedy has kind of got me in that room. So when Lisa Schaefer called me with this, when she told me the idea of Crickets, I knew immediately where that song was going to go. And I said, "Oh yeah," I said, I'm in. And she invited a true lyricist named Brent Baxter to join us on that song. Brent was writing at Peer Music at the time. And so we wrote the song. And when it was done, I thought it was really good, and Lisa thought it was really good, but Peer listened to it, and they didn't want to do a demo on it. So Lisa and I, on our own, got Kevin Denny, who's a great country singer, to sing the demo. Just a little acoustic demo, and there are crickets interspersed in these awkward pauses in the conversation. Right. So shortly after that, Lisa got it to Luke Bryan's producer, and they put it right on hold immediately. And I thought, oh man, this is it. This is my Brady Seals check getting ready to come. And and they came off of it after 6 months and just broke our heart. And then Easton Corbin put it on hold, and he had it on a couple of months, and he came off of it. And then Peer kind of woke up, and they put it on the desk for Joe Nichols, and they loved it, and it became the title track of his album. You know. So.
Oh, I love it. I love it.
And that just goes, and you know this too. Sometimes you know, just because you get turned down 1 or 2 or 3 or 4 times or whatever, the songwriter kind of internally knows, I don't care. I know this is a good song. It's just a matter of getting it to the right person, and we didn't give up on that song, and I'm glad we didn't.
Absolutely, absolutely. And you know, as you know, being a songwriter these days, you can't just be a songwriter. You've got to be a lot of other different kinds of things. And I know a big part of being a songwriter these days is going out and touring and letting people know, you know, about your craft and all of the tunes that you have, you know, like playing fresh material, so on and so forth. And I know that you've got like a really, really cool thing going with, you know, some awesome, like Steve Dean and Victoria and Linda, and you know, so tell me a little bit about some of your music projects that you got going on. I know you've got Hits and Grins, and then you've got the thing with Linda. Can you tell us a little bit about that?
Yeah, Hits and Grins with Steve Dean and Victoria Veneer, and then the trio with Linda and Lang is called Evening in the Round. So I do shows with both of them, and you know, even though I'll get to do a serious song or two within the evening, I always consider my roles to provide a little laughter, a little relief, and kind of moderate. Because of my radio skills, I can kind of pull a songwriter around through and make it pop a little more by setting other people up and leading them into a story they forgot, you know, and get a laugh out of that. So that's kind of how I view that. But I also play a lot of solo shows and just regular songwriter rounds with folks like you at songwriter festivals. And you know, lately I've gotten into the Parrot Head world a little bit because I have some friends there where I'll go and play beach gigs with guys that play beach music. And
now that's a great gig, right?
Yeah, you can't beat that. I've got a dear friend named Brent Burns who's, you know, he's at the top of that world, and he's recorded 17 or 18 albums, and we started writing on album 3 for him after I heard him sing a song for the tourists down there in Gulf Shores, Alabama, called "If It's Snowbird Season, Why Can't We Shoot 'Em?" And so we started writing like fiends, and gosh, we've probably got 60 cuts together on his albums, and there's some really good stuff, a mixture of beach and funny songs. The song that, you know, I'm Going Ugly Early, was like the 3rd or 4th song I wrote with him. Cletus D. Judd recorded that as well, and it's been a go-to song and made people laugh literally around the world for me. So I like my life, you know, because I don't know what tomorrow's going to bring, but I like all of it, you know. If Hits and Grins has got a gig this week and Linda's got a gig the next week and I've got a comedy thing the week after, I like plug and play like that. It keeps it fresh and different all the time, you know.
Yeah, it keeps you on your toes, you know. Yeah. So speaking of the future, I'm just going to touch on this just for a little bit, because I know just for human beings in general, I saw this thing the other day about AI, and I think that it was Oprah interviewing the guy who has OpenAI, I think, who started OpenAI, which is this, you know, it's kind of like Chat GPT kind of thing, right? So how do you think, as a songwriter, how do you think that AI is going to change things? And are you scared? Does it bother you? What's your take on it?
I try not to worry about things I can't change or that are out of my control, Brady, and it's going to be whatever it's going to be, and we won't know what that's going to be for a while. By the time that it's going to be what it's really going to be, I'll be gone and you'll be dealing with it, you know, I'm sure. But I mean, I just try to keep in mind that, you know, I can remember when I was in Cincinnati and radio, going back to that. I can remember when I started there, I was playing 45 RPM records, playing vinyl. And then we went to cartridge tapes. And I thought I'd never learn how to use that. And then one day they came in and said, we're converting to CD players. And I thought, oh my God, because you get so comfortable with what you know You know,
True.
you shut your mind down and go, I don't want to learn that. I don't want to learn a computer. I don't want to, leave me alone, you know. But you have to learn it. And then about the time they came in and it was going all digital, I just had to have a little talk with myself and going, dude, you know, if you resist technology, you know, you are going to get run over. You know, you better adapt.
So true.
You better adapt, you know, or you're going to get run over. So I try to keep a really open mind about those things and go, yeah, there's going to be some. I can't ever see myself using AI, you know, but I don't know. I don't want to ever say never. I would think more like, okay, well, if it's going to be here and it's going to be a part of the music business, how can I use it to benefit what I do? How can I use it in a good way, a way that suits me, you know? So
yeah, and you know, it's funny that you say that too, because I remember, and I'm sure you remember too, when selfies were weird, right?
Well, I have this great song, Brady, called "Get Over Your Selfie," and the hook is get a little self-helpy and get over your selfie. You know, so I'm not a big. I have resisted the whole selfie thing, and when it gets so bad that you actually buy a frickin' stick for a selfie, you need to check yourself in somewhere. Now, I'm saying.
Yeah, well, see, you know, because what happens is the culture changes. You know, I mean, you know, what's cool and what's not cool changes. I've certainly seen that in my time on this planet, and you know.
But you're really good at that, Brady. Brady, for folks, you're really good at pivoting and adapting, because I always see you as one of the first. You're on it. You're on this new thing. You're on that new thing. You're not afraid to experiment, and that's what most people do when we get older. We just go, I can't learn that. I don't want to learn that. You know, and so you don't. So you don't. You know.
True. Well, and you know, for me, you know, as you know, I've probably had more lives than a cat when it come to getting record deals and stuff in town. Now, mind you, I'm 55, so I doubt that the record deal, or I doubt that I'll ever get a record deal again. But listen, you never freaking know, man. I just keep on trying, you know. That's all you can do, you know.
Yeah, you still got enough hair to make it happen, man.
Oh my gosh, I love it. I love it. So I do want to touch on the song "Finger Picking Good" real fast, because I think it's a cool one. So tell me a little bit about "Finger Picking Good."
Oh yeah, Christy Cox recorded that. Christy Cox is from Australia, a very noted bluegrass artist in Australia, but she's lived here in the States for several years, and she's rocking it right now. And so the last album, Jerry Salley is her producer, who's a longtime friend, and I write a lot with Jerry. They needed one more up-tempo song, so Jerry booked a writing session with me and her and him. And so that day I walked in with that hook. I said, man, I got this hook called "Finger Picking Good," you know, and Jerry just lit up. He knew immediately where that was going. We were going to write a barn burner about people that can finger pick, you know, and we wrote and I knew we wrote the dog out of it that day. And when it was done, I asked, it just hit me, it just happened. I just asked Christy, I said, you know Tommy Emmanuel, don't you, Christy? Because he's from Australia. And she goes, oh yeah, mate, he used to sit in with our band all the time. And I said, do you know what would take finger picking good from good to great? Would be if you could get Tommy Emmanuel to play on a song called "Finger Picking Good."
Absolutely.
And so Jerry called him up, and he said yes. And I was there that night when they laid the tracks down. And I've been around Tommy 2 or 3 times. He's if you're not familiar with Tommy Emmanuel, pull up something and watch this cat. He's crazy great.
Absolutely,
and he was
he's
so
an
nice.
Incredible guy too. And let me tell you a quick Tommy Emmanuel story. So Gordon Kennedy, our guitar player who plays with the Petty Junkies, he was telling me just the other day he went down to Gruen Guitars here in Nashville, and he saw Tommy, and he's a big fan. He's like, oh my God, there's Tommy, you know. So he goes up to Tommy and he says, hey man, you know, I'm a guitar player and this and that, you know. And I'm like, dude, you're freaking Gordon Kennedy, you know. But he's like, yeah, I'm a guitar player and this and that or whatever. And he said my dad's Jerry Kennedy. He was the guy who played. He says, wait a minute. He says, your dad's Jerry Kennedy? And he says, yeah. He says, I was getting ready to go over to see my dad over here at assisted living place or whatever. And Tommy says, can I follow you over there so I can play some songs to your dad? And he was like, are you kidding me? He just literally met Tommy And Tommy was willing to go and give of his time and give joy to somebody like Jerry just right on the spot. So that says a whole lot about
that is who he is, Brady. And that night he recorded that song in that studio. My wife went with me. There were like, we knew Tommy was coming, so there was a little party of about 7 or 8 of us that got to sit and watch him lay that down. And he just took his time. He wanted it to be perfect, and of course it was. And when he came out, he just visited with everybody, and he just started playing stuff for us, like this close, a couple things, and then he left. He left to go home. We all said goodbye, and about 3 minutes later, he comes walking back in with his guitar, and he said, "Can I play y'all something new that I wrote?" And he took the guitar back out and just played us another stuff. So he loves to play. That's who he is. But anyway, you can find that video, Finger Picking Good, on YouTube. It's phenomenal. You can see what he does there in the song. We were lucky the song won the Song of the Year in Australia that year for the Golden Guitar Awards, which is their equivalent of a CMA award. But I've got another great Tommy story. I was filling in for Bill Cody on WSM one morning. Bill had to have the morning off, and the guest was Tommy Emmanuel. And so that made me really happy that Tommy was going to be my guest this morning. And it was a cold morning there at the Opryland Hotel. I had a songwriting appointment that day right after the show was over, so I brought my guitar and I put it in the studio and stood it in the corner. Well, Tommy comes in and we're live on the air, and he's just being Tommy Emmanuel and just blowing me away. And he finishes the song, and I said to him on the air, I said, "Tommy," I said, "man, I have got a complaint, you know." And he said, "What's that, mate?" And I said, "That's my guitar over there." And I said, "It will not play what you're playing." And I thought he'd laugh, but he didn't. And he finally said, "Well, Bill," he says, "it will when I play it."
I love it, man. That's what it's all about right there. It's all about the players, man. You know?
Yes, it is. And in bluegrass music, I write a lot of bluegrass songs these days, as you know, and that's especially true in that genre. The pickers and the singers in bluegrass, they're phenomenal talents.
Yes.
And they can all play so fast, I can't even think. It's just unbelievable.
Oh my gosh. Well, listen, I'm gonna wrap this thing up. I know I've taken an hour of your time. You know, Bill, I love you to death, man. I think that you're one of the best songwriters here in Nashville, and I wish that you could get into some of those like Morgan Wallen circles and those kinds of things, to where you could just freaking have a bunch of hits, man, because you are so worthy of it, man. And I really, really appreciate you coming on here and spending your time with me, and especially all the people who has joined us here. They've been commenting, loving it, Cincinnati stuff. Says let me see what they said here. It's amazing how you can write a song that is the map of my life. I still sit back and listen and cry to that song.
So, are they talking about "I'm Going Ugly Early"? Which song are they talking about?
Yes, absolutely. But no, I just appreciate you, you know, kind of being the guinea pig for me, because I don't have it all together, but like you said, I'm trying to embrace a whole new way of being able to bring myself, my music, and hopefully encouragement, instruction, mentoring, if you will, to songwriters, artists, and just people who love music, you know?
Yeah, you know, my life has just honestly been so blessed because of people like you. I mean, I just pinch myself sometimes because, you know, I've always loved the art. I've always loved songwriting, and wrote my first song, I think, when I was like 15 or 16, so I've always dabbled in it. But then when I got really serious about it, every songwriter wants to be validated. You just want to be validated and think that you belong, because it's such a long learning curve to get in those kind of circles. So when you said yes to writing with me and we had success, and when Linda Davis said yes, and people like that allowed me to keep getting in better circles all the time, that helped validate my songwriting. And you know how songwriting works. If I write a great song with you, you know, there might be somebody in your chain of writers that go, "Man, you ought to write with this Bill Whyte guy, you know, he's pretty good." That happens too. So it's just like the most wonderful thing to me, because I'm fans of people like yours, and I was huge fans of Linda Davis and interviewed her many times on the radio, just like I did you. And so many people that I interviewed on the radio that I was fans of, I now write with, and are great personal friends, as well. So I've had more blessings than the good Lord deserved to give me. That's for sure, Brady.
Well, brother, I so appreciate you. All the viewers out there, make sure that you check out Bill if he comes through your town, with all of the musical projects that he's got going on. And Bill, thank you, brother. Have a wonderful day, and we'll talk soon, and hopefully write another one soon.
Yeah, and for those of you watching this is Brady's first attempt on his YouTube channel, so spread the word, and hit the subscribe button and get people to chime in here to allow Brady to continue this for a long time with some other great guests that you'll enjoy. So support my buddy here on YouTube, if you will. I love you, brother.
Hey, love you back, buddy. Thank you so much, Bill. I'll talk to you soon, buddy.
Take care.
Bye-bye.